Hello, and welcome back to Arcane Adventures Recapped. We will be discussing the highlights and main events of Chapter 2 of our new adventure. So let's go ahead and jump into Chapter 2, Private Eyes. We open at dawn within the Bronze Borough of the city of Provonere. At the apartment flat where our party currently resides and calls home, with our first half of payment and a document detailing the missing persons from Madame Lorem, we prepare for investigation. She urges our group to investigate the most recent disappearance, that being the Loxodon Esquire Luso. After a bit of planning and decision-making, the group enacts their own means of this investigation of his estate in a rather multi-pronged approach. Greeted at the doorway by the keeper of the house, a Loxodon named Chanella, Sizik and Paloma enter the estate without guise, simply claiming that they were here to take a tour of the estate, followed in secretly by Owenel and Ultrix. Trying a more stealthy approach, however, Pura, Crater, Evidin, and Rancor each found their own means of entry into the estate. The keeper of the house is more or less so blind, and is unable to distinguish that these people are not who they claim to be, which is Red Shielders on an investigation to find the missing master of the house, Luso himself. And thus, all goes rather well at the start. As they begin to investigate, however, the worst possible scenario presents itself. Esquire Roran, the Loxodon brother of the missing Esquire Luso, arrives early from his journey from Hydroxyl Vexen. Roran begins shouting orders at Chanella and urging our party to vacate the premise. But, after a bit of persuasion, he permits them to stay so long as they are truly working on the investigation to find his brother. But not everyone is fully convinced that this man is who he says it is. Rancor, in particular, has his doubts. But nonetheless, we begin to investigate the study, the last location that Chanella saw Esquire Luso, in which we discover a splotch of dried blood on the rug, an unfinished handwritten letter to Miss Tylexia, and a number of ledger accounts and payments. After further investigating, Evidin finds that the unfinished letter does not match the actual handwriting of another unfinished letter written to Miss Tylexia found within a locked drawer within the study desk. Ultrix identifies the bloodstain on the rug, that the wound that would have created such a splotch must have been some sharp object to create a puncture wound such as a knife or dagger. Crater finds a trail of footprints leading off into the woods, while Pura notices that the lawn has been recently cut as if to hide the minute trail of blood leading off with the footprints into the woods themselves. All of this combined suggests that someone went to great detail and great length to cover up this disappearance. Foul play may be in motion. The group splits up. Pura and Crater follow the trail of boot prints eastbound through the Iadawell woods. The rest of the group decides to further question Chanella and Esquire Roran before they too, except for Rancor, head off into the woods. Rancor holds back to investigate his suspicion of this strange man, who claims to be the brother of Esquire Luso, but arrived relatively early from his trip. Deeper in the woods, Pura and Crater find a torn piece of beige cloth on one of the pine branches, and then later stumble into a clearing in the woods, where a shovel, dirty kitchen knife, and large mound of recently moved soil all resides. Without wasting any time, they begin to dig, and it does not take them long to find not one, but 4 corpses. The corpse still fresh of the missing Esquire Luso, along with the other 3 missing council members. With haste and in panic, Pura calls Relzara via the Sending Stone to inform him, of who is quite surprised and appreciative of the call, and is glad that the group chose to investigate so soon, as Esquire Roran is actually en route to arrive in Provonere in the next several days. Over the Sending, however, the two exchange shock, one on Relzar's part that there has been a murder, or 4 murders in this case, and on Pyrrha's part, to learn that Esquire Roran actually isn't here. So, who is at the house, we might ask? Shocked by this information, our party returns to the estate, where we find a situation where rancor has escalated with Esquire Roran. It is revealed that this is not the true brother of Esquire Luso, but someone sent to rob his estate while no one was present. Someone went to great lengths to conceal an identity as Roran. As they investigate this stranger, a countdown has begun with this individual. In a matter of moments, however, the so-called Esquire Roran detonates in an explosion that sends all of our protagonists flying. With that, we are quick to depart from the scene, trying not to draw any more attention, returning home to the apartment flat to figure out what on Ilethia was that, and who murdered 4 council members, and why. On the way back to the apartment flat, Altrix splits off from the group and makes his way to Steel and Thundelver, where he plans on borrowing their forge, quote-unquote borrowing, to create one of his designs. What ends up actually happening, however, is that Altrix uses Yazir's rug to restrain Mr. Altho Steele, a council member of Provonere and the co-owner of the shop, and entering the private workshop area of this business. He then meets Lady Letelch Thundelver, another council member of Provonere, and the other co-owner of the shop, in a not-to-be-unexpected confrontation. What ensues is a quick arrest of the Blue Dragonborn after he attempted to use the forge with these 2 council members without permission, and was trespassing on their private property. Meanwhile, back at the apartment flat, our other protagonists try to sort through the mess of what happened just earlier that day with both the events at Esquire Luso's estate, and also the uncovered 4 corpses of the missing council members of Provonere. Now they are racking with clues as to who might be the person responsible for the murder of these 4 well-known political figures. After a bit of conversation about the clues found in and around the estates and in the woods, we decide to take a bit of a break to gather some information across the city and a bit of time to relax. Pyrrha, Sizik, and Paloma head to Hexes and Scrolls to meet once again with Madame Lepori and gather some magical supplies. Pyrrha then heads to Tonic and Toxica to gather information about Miss Alexia, while Paloma and Sizik head to the Great Divide to enjoy some peaceful moments of rest. Owenel decides to go look for Altric, as it seems odd he has not returned in some time. Owenel later meets up with Pyrrha on his walk to the Tonic and Toxica after he found out that Altrix was arrested for, quote-unquote, breaking and entering, rugging a council member, and refusing to pay for services. Pyrrha splits off, however, and Owenel continues on to the Garden of the Gold Shield, where Altrix is found to be deep in conversation about economics with Chief Officer of the Gold Shield, Officer Mox Flynn, the Golden Dragonborn, who is also a council member. Altrix, lost mostly in any type of understanding about this foreign term of economics, sits in confusion as Officer Mox Flynn grills him about how to understand the basic fundamentals of capitalism. Owenel waits in the lobby with the lights flicker and then dim. Altrix is then greeted by Madame Janorum and Relzar, who offer insight on how to persuade Mox Flynn to let him out of jail. When the lights return, Altrix is once again greeted by Officer Mox Flynn and accompanied now by Owenel, who enters the room. The two surprisingly talk their way out of having to pay a great debt instead of serving jail time or paying a bail up front. At their departure, Madame Janorum, Relzar, and Officer Mox Flynn are pleased in that Owenel and Altrix have passed a test, even though Altrix did break the law, as they were attempting to see how much information they were willing to give up. Sizik and Paloma, on the other hand, have traveled to the towering skyports of Provonere, where Sizik proceeds to lie about their presence there as a early night shift crew and hijack an airship, though Paloma only wanted someone to take her on an airship ride over the city. This nearly causes a catastrophic crash into another airship and then one of the Skydock ports. Luckily, though, with some brute force, Paloma is able to disable the engine of the ship, and the two are forced to skydive from the balcony of the vessel and escape into the shadows of the dusk far below. We all, once again, conveniently convene at the apartment flat, where Yazira is waiting for Altrix, who seems to pay no attention to her. She sulks outside with the rest of the group, and while they discuss inside their next course of action, which appears to be paying a visit to a Miss Tylexia, who resides on the southeastern portion of Consilas Hill. Paloma goes back to offer consoles to Yazira, encouraging her to cheer up and perhaps recognize that Ultrix may not like her the way that she would like him to like her. The two then quietly and secretively depart for a girls' night out on the town, leaving the rest of the party to begin to slowly turn in for the night. Tomorrow is a new day, and hopefully a better one. Yazira and Paloma spend time at Maven's Nook, a quaint book nook tavern and somewhat opera house. They discuss matters of their own personal lives and get to know each other just a little bit more, offering each other some personal advice. After which, they return to the apartment flat to find Ultrix toiling away at creating a half-plate of armor with the makeshift forge, using the old oven, which he has now filled with molten metal. Everyone retires for the evening, however, and enjoys a good night's rest. The following morning, once again hoping that it'd be a good day, Pura, Crater, Yazira, and Owen will search for jobs to earn a bit of income on the side, while also working in this, perhaps, hired investigation. Paloma does some training at the Storm Jojo. Rancor goes to the Hex Market to visit an old friend passing through, the mysterious Aurel. Evedin hangs out at the apartment flat, and Sizik exercises and looks for bugs, notably finding a grasshopper that unfortunately gets eaten by Cannibal, one of Ultrix's dragon fireflies, that had escaped while he was slumbering over the oven forge. About midday, our group once again returns to the flat, where they discuss their next course of action, notably a possible stakeout at Miss Tylexia's estate, fearing that she may be the next target if a murder ploy is truly in action. They plot an undercover mission, where half of them will pose as Red Shielder investigators and the other half will keep watch outside. Upon arrival and further investigation at the estate, things do not appear normal. Something feels off. At a guard rotation interval, the group waiting outside decides to make a break across the lawn and find a way to enter the estate and do some investigation on their own. Except for Crater, who decides to wait behind the tree line, and Sizik, who has vanished earlier that day. Where did he go? We don't know. The two groups investigate different parts of the house, unbeknownst of each other's presence and exact location. Things are going okay until our second group comes across a small chest with a blue crescent moon insignia painted on it, and Pura attempts to steal it. Unbeknownst to them, this triggers an alarm spell, which alerts Miss Tylexia that someone is attempting to steal from her. Though it had been previously noted that she was out for official business, she quickly returns to her home, only to find three intruders, Pura, Evedin, and Paloma. On the other side of the house, however, Ultrix, Owenel, and Rancor, still posing as Red Shielder investigators, uncover an alchemy chamber and a strange room with a pool of water and some arcanist gemstones, all hidden behind a painting. They decide not to worry too much about it right now. They take the stones, the gold, and depart the room. Evedin, within the study of Miss Alexia, uncovers documentation about a proposed tax increase, a massive 5% hike on the current taxation rate. Paloma, while looking through the wardrobe within the master bedroom, Miss Alexia's house and main bedroom, of course, finds an undershirt that appears mildly dirty and has a portion of it torn off. Pura then compares with it. They find this to be an exact match to the article of clothing that Pura and Crater found in the woods while on the trail outside of Luso's manor, making a sudden 1 + 1 = 2 connection. When the sudden return of Miss Tylexia, however, they must now suddenly flee from the house and evade a tumultuous interaction with the hired guards on patrol and the councilwoman herself. On their way through the balcony doorway on the second floor, as they plan to jump out of the upper floor window onto the ground below, Evedin collects a stack of papers that directly reference the disappearance and death of Mr. Dorcleaves. Believing this to be incriminating evidence, it is picked up with haste as they leap from the upper story of this house back onto the back lawn. Responding in character as Red Shielders, of course, Ultrix, Rancor, and Owen will chase after their companions as they run for the trees, notably after a brief confrontational conversation with Miss Tylexia. Unbeknownst to all, however, upon reaching the threshold between the lawn and the Iadowell woods surrounding the lawn, an arcane device shoots electric jolts that ultimately traps Pura inside the property premise and gets him caught by the so-called Red Shielder investigators, the hired guards, and Miss Tylexia. After a desperate attempt to talk their way out of this situation, and even going as far as to try to slip Ozin, disguised as a dagger, into Pyrrha's possession, Miss Tylexia orders them to vacate and not return unless they have a warrant to be on her property, or they will be severely punished and lose their jobs. With half of the party making haste into the woods and the other half escorted off the premise, the low rolls of thunder in the distance signify an oncoming afternoon storm, while Pyrrha is left in the hands of Miss Tylexia and her guards. With our protagonist divided, Ultrix seeks the knowledge of Madame Lepori regarding the strange room that he and Rancor and Owenel found at the estate of Miss Tylexia earlier that day. She provided some theories about the purpose or function of this hidden chamber, secretly concealed behind the painting in the alchemy chamber of all places. Sizik, elsewhere in the city, finds himself in a hazy loss of consciousness, and in the midst of a dream of darkness that felt eerily too real after a visit from his babushka. Nonetheless, the party would reconvene at the apartment flat once again to discuss the next course of action, ultimately trying to decide a way that would best help Pyrrha and also continue the investigation and approach it from a legal standpoint. As the storm clouds move in closer and rain begins to fall from the sky, Ultrix and Paloma head to Claremorth University to speak with Professor Larson Archulets regarding the same information that Ultrix discussed with Madame Lepori. Archulets theorizes that the chamber might be symbolic of sorts or some kind of tether, agreeing with the perspectives of Madame Lepori. Back at the apartment flat, however, Owenel was caught off guard when a battered, bruised, and beaten Pyrrha arrived back at the apartment. This oddity was fully realized when Ultrix and Paloma returned, questioning what happened truly to Pyrrha over the last few hours. And the real question, how did he manage to escape from Miss Tylexia? Pyrrha noted that he was tortured by her, but that she ultimately let him go, leaving him both physically and traumatically scarred. After more discussion, it was decided that a series of errands across Provenere would be a good plan as we push into the later hours of the afternoon. We visit Madame Lepori once again to pick up a magic item. We stop at Gearwhistle Gizmos to see if Raven Gearwhistle had any news for Ultrix, and then we head to the Gardens of the Gold Shield to see if we can find a visit with Officer Mox Flynn. However, the afternoon grows late, and the Red Shielder on duty noted that Mox had likely returned to his home for the evening. The party was able to convince this Red Shielder to try to contact Officer Mox Flynn, and the guard noted surprise when he was instructed by his supervisor to permit this group a personal escort and entry into Mox Flynn's personal estate. So, the group travels once more to Consilas Hill, and visits Mox in his home in the later hours of the afternoon and early hours of the evening, as the gloomy skies continue their downpour. The party presents their evidence and case against Miss Tylexia, citing that a murder weapon, written documentation, and an article of clothing matching the torn fabric in the woods suggest to a reasonable degree that Miss Tylexia is, at very least, suspicious, and at most, responsible for the murders of 4 council members. Either way, however, Officer Mox hopes that this is enough evidence to convince the council to launch a full-fledged investigation, and intends on conveying that in a special called council meeting the next morning. He urges our group to continue to evade public eye and take a day or two to lay low while the council discusses the contentious matters at hand. After leaving the residence of Officer Mox, our group returns to the flat nestled in the bronze burrows of Provenere, as dark skies continue to downpour. Evident, however, spends a portion of the evening at the Tonic and Toxica, where she procures a bit more information on Miss Tylexia that Pyrrha was not quite able to get the day prior, or earlier that day. She was also informed by Tony that someone may be coming for her specifically as well, but noted that this was new information. Pyrrha and Crater take some time to practice their show at one of the smaller venues, while the rest of the party returns to their home. Rancor, who had been out on his own as well, found an old woman who seemed quite startled by his presence and kept fearfully mentioning the name of the Lady of Light, and begged all, including him, to stay away. That evening, the group spends some time attempting to heed the advice of the Red Shielder captain, resting and staying out of public eye. Note the word attempting. Owenel decides he is going to build a stable for his steed, Cricket, and is determined to fetch some lumber on his own by pulling over a tree. Yes, I said pulling over a tree correctly. Evedin prepares a nice dinner, while Sizik and Paloma have an important conversation about responsibility and thinking before acting. Rancor and Paloma spar a bit outside in the drizzling rain, while Ultrix reads the book that Mox gave him, The Void Behind the Painting. As the evening draws to a close, a much-needed rest befalls our adventurers. The following morning, before daybreak, Paloma awakes and heads off to her dojo class, and Sizik also wakes up early and heads to the Provonary Skydock, where he finds Lieutenant Marcus Hodoros, the Skydock portmaster, and proceeds to try to apologize for his involvement with the airship being stolen and nearly causing a catastrophic event in the days prior. To his dismay, however, the portmaster did not take this apology as well as he had hoped, and attempted to arrest Sizik with the help of several other Red Shielders on duty there. He did, however, ultimately escape and fled to Madame Lepori's shop to hide out for a while. Evedin also visited Hexes and Scrolls to acquire an enchanted rapier. Ultrix visited the Hex markets where he met Aurel, and to partake in an arcane energy extraction experiment with the gnomish artificer that went surprisingly well, thanks to some nice dice rolls. While about in the Hex, quite a few of us overheard newsies announcing a special called council session starting today. While to the south of Provonary, Owenel headed out to handle a job at Gladekeeper Farms, where Pharma Idra Glade showed him an infestation of pomegraniums affecting her orchard crop, which appear like pomegranate seeds but are actually quite nuanced pests. After completing her training, Paloma and Rancor visit the library so Rancor can investigate the phrase or name, the Lady of Light, and see if perhaps this is a deity or some other type of religious figure. Having little luck, they also visit Professor Archulets to inquire on the matter, who noted that the Lady of Light was likely someone more modern, perhaps a code name for a real person, as he did not recall any important historical or divine figures that were referred by that title. After wrapping up a bit of business, our party returned to the apartment flat, except for Sizik. With the council session in full swing, we are now left to wonder what is happening truly within Consilas Keep. Pura, Paloma, and Evedin begin a search for Sizik, starting to get worried, at least Paloma is, where he could be, while Ultrix stays back at the apartment flat to work on a project of his. Unfortunately, not finding much about the whereabouts of Sizik, Paloma returns to the flat once again, while Pura and Evedin head to the well-known casino on the Hex, the Silver Serpent, where they engage in some gambling games. Pura is convinced that he saw Tony, and the two of them tried to look for him, but ultimately lost sight of him, as he was headed up to the 4th floor of the building where the two of them could not enter. So they returned to the flat as well. Paloma, upon returning, did not find Ultrix, so she instead listened to Yazira's very poor practice of flute skills. Owenel spent the day working on his stable, Rancor was out and about who knows where, and no one has seen Crater, not even Pura, though they spent the night practicing for their show the night prior. Elsewhere, however, Sizik was waiting inside the crate for Madame Lepori to return, hiding out from, perhaps, Red Shielders. After 6 hours or so, well into the afternoon, Sizik was once again met by the arcane shopkeep and decided to return home, after Paloma told him that she was very worried about him when he did return. He felt like Paloma would be worried that he was gone so long, and tried to explain his best without explaining too much about where he'd been. The group also had not seen Ultrix, though a rather well-decorated flask that Paloma had found in the kitchen and stashed in her bag a little earlier today was now smoking. Fearing that it may be a trap, she quickly planned to hurl it out into the street when she suddenly vanished from this plane and was pulled into the strange bottle-like container. There, in an extra-dimensional space, she found Ultrix struggling in a room that was boiling hot and filled with smoke. He was surprised to see her, but thankful that she was able to hand him the one tool that he needed in that moment. Upon returning to their actual plane, Ultrix attempted to explain his contraption, the combustion siphon, to his companions, though it was severely complicated for them to understand. And in the midst of that, he also received a message on the sending stone from what sounded like the voice of Relzar Kinper, which beckoned them to quickly come to Consilas Keep that evening, now that the session had adjourned. Unbeknownst to them, however, this was actually not Relzar, but rather Miss Hylexia. Nonetheless, they, of course not knowing this, made their way to Consilas Keep, where they intended to meet Officer Mox Flynn in his office on the 11th floor of the building. They got a bit sidetracked, however, when Pura was kidnapped and Sizik was arrested at the behest of Lieutenant Marcus Fedoris for his involvement in the near-catastrophic airship hijacking. Split between what to pursue, Ultrix and Eviden decided to look for Pura, while Officer Mox had a serious conversation with Sizik and Paloma about the punishment for his crimes. Meanwhile, Pura met secretly with Miss Hylexia, who confessed that she planned on admitting her guilt and accepting her arrest. After she had gone, Ultrix and Eviden found Pura laying on the floor of a basement cellar and decided to take him home, as that would probably be best for him. He looked a little bit drunk. But on their way out, both groups, Officer Mox Flynn, Paloma, and Sizik, and now Eviden, Pura, and Ultrix, met face-to-face for an interaction between Officer Mox and Miss Hylexia, where she admitted that she was guilty and was ready to be taken into custody and some questioning. Shocked at this rather strange turn of events, and now questioning the motives from both Miss Hylexia and Pura, Miss Hylexia was arrested and spent the next hour with Mox and Ultrix while they questioned her about her involvement in the murders of 4 council members, her working colleagues. After that, Officer Mox explained that the party had actually done their job, and he was thankful for their service. The party then returns to their home once again in the Bronze Burrows, equally happy that their task has been completed, but finding themselves unable to shake that gut feeling that something else is at play. That's all for this Arcane Adventures recapped episode. We hope to see you around in our main sessions, and we hope you'll follow along with us in Chapter 3. Thank you.